Hello and welcome to the Me Financial Podcast. I'm Michelle Moses, your host. I am here with Andy Woodward, first and foremost, my friend. And today we are going to talk about cryptocurrency. First, a little bit about me. I am a certified financial planner, a realtor, a small business owner, and a former e-commerce store owner. And I started this podcast because I really wanted to talk about the emotions behind money, mindset around money, and how not everything is for everyone and how to help you choose what's right for you. And as I said, Andy is here. We're going to talk about some cryptocurrency and why it's valuable and exactly what it is. Andy is a software developer and architect working in the financial technology sector, including banking and payment processing for more than 30 years. Kind of ages you, Andy.
I know.
He was first introduced to Bitcoin in 2011 and began actively working on crypto development in 2016. And I can guarantee that is before most people had even heard of crypto. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you for the invite. I know this is going to be fun.
I know. I'm excited to talk about this. So I know a lot of people have questions, and we were talking a little bit before we got started, and he was saying, Andy was saying that he gives all kinds of speeches about crypto. So it is a hot topic because, you're on the news and you see one article where it says it's not worth anything, and then other people that say that it will have inherent value. And I'm interested because I get swayed day by day. I am an investor in cryptocurrency, thanks to Andy. Andy and I go way back. He knows a lot about me, and we are in a mutual friend group. And I got into crypto because of Andy. So thank you for that. And it has been a very interesting road. So
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. You know, it's like is it a currency or is it a cult? You know, sometimes you got to ask that.
Yeah, you do. Is it just like in the gaming world? Because, there's people that just like kind of live online and you don't know if it's just one of those things that they need to play a game. Or does it really, have value? And is it something that will be, as big as the internet, or is like people are talking about AI and all of that too? So what I wanted to get started with was, do you think, because, we can talk about cryptocurrency and what it actually is. And I think that kind of gets complicated too. But, I think what's the topic that's on everyone's mind is, one, what is it? But two, is it really valuable? Does it have a future? All of that kind of stuff. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Which
I know.
I'm going to throw in a few more things to unpack. So I was like jotting down a definition of really what is cryptocurrency and leaving the word currency out because I think it's a little bit of a misnomer.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay.
That we need to kind of layer into this discussion, I think, and really what crypto is, the abbreviation of cryptocurrency. A lot of people call it crypto because currency or cash or whatever, it can be a little bit misused in this. And a lot of this can be misused. But kind of the definition I use is that it's a distributed virtual algorithmic token generation system with defined constraints.
Okay.
There's a lot to unpack there. So
that actually kind of makes sense to me, even saying that. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll go through bits of it, which is, when you talk about distributed, it's one of those things that anybody can play and participate in this. The software, and a lot of what I'm going to say applies in most cases. There's exceptions to all of these things, but the very code that underpins crypto is readily available. If you want to actually pull it down off of the internet and have some technical wherewithal, you could set up your own crypto in an afternoon.
Wow. And that's why there's so many.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, so at that point, it becomes more of a marketing exercise, if you will. So the distributed side of it is if you get out there and say, I've started Andy's crypto. Here's the IP address and some information. Go ahead and set up and start mining and generating crypto. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the technical aspects of it, like mining or anything like that, because I think really just getting into what is crypto is more important. But it allows anybody to start processing and using these algorithms to then expand the network. So that's the distributed side of it. When we say algorithmic, like when you talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are the bigger cryptos, they're not built on any new technology. The main technology is what's called public key encryption that was invented in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing that brought about the internet brought about crypto.
Okay.
So in 2000, the patents for public key encryption expired. And lo and behold, that's about the time that e-commerce really blew up, because the same thing that secures somebody from stealing your password or being able to buy things in your name on Amazon or what have you is the exact same underpinnings for crypto.
Okay.
It's just public key encryption.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you made it so simple and concise like that. Okay.
So
cool.
So once those things, the patents expired, so they no longer needed to be paid for, they were just open to anybody to actually use. That's when researchers really started piling in. And as you commented before, I've been around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when all of these things, like we were waiting for when public key encryption would be released to the public domain.
Oh, wow.
Because of the amount of things that it could introduce. And this is just an extension of it.
And so did it first start like in banking? This is my own personal question. So were you waiting for it to come out? Like you knew that it was, and were you already using it like in banking and you were waiting for it to kind of roll out to other things?
Yeah, we were using it for quite a while in e-commerce systems, if you will. There, before the term e-commerce, you know, to secure communication between banks and various partners and things like that.
Right.
Because
okay.
prior to this, you know, Visa and MasterCard and everything existed. So there was interbank communication and things like that that was secured by these technologies, but they had to be licensed.
Okay.
So they were very proprietary because of that.
Right.
So then what happened once these things opened up, that's when, you know, if you notice 2000, when these things came about, is exactly the same time as the dot-com bubble. So everybody went nuts, piling in on innovation and things like that. And it was a lot of things that we just couldn't foresee, and it just mushroomed.
Okay.
So 10 years later is around 2009. You know, there were actually some derivatives before then. But, you know, the big one that came out in 2009 was Bitcoin. And if you look at it, if you understand the public key encryption, it's just there's nothing perfect in technology, but it's a pretty impressive implementation of it, to the point that, you know, it's been the big prize. You're talking $1 trillion prize for every hacker in the world to actually knock that thing over. And they've been able to nibble around the edges of it and things like that. You hear about little hacks and everything like that, but so far nobody's been able to attack or bring down Bitcoin
because
itself.
It's so solid and safe. And
it's based upon these algorithmic proofs of public key encryption that have been around since the 70s. So there was just massive amount of research in universities and things like that all prior to this. So really Bitcoin just blew out of a scoop of this and a scoop of that of a lot of research that had actually been done before, and a lot of commercial work that was just suddenly in the public domain. Okay.
And so then when they made Bitcoin, then it was his job to then market it, like what you were talking about?
All they did was you know, they actually truly don't know. They have some speculation, but they don't know who actually did it. You know, there's the Satoshi is the name.
Yeah.
You know, this mythical person that they have some ideas as to who it is, but they just put this out there and turned it loose. And, you know, nerds or various technical people got a hold of it, and nerds like me, and then really started going to town on it. But it provided an on-ramp that allowed people to use computers to crunch away on, and again, I'm not going to get into this, but crunch away on algorithmic proofs in order to then be rewarded with some Bitcoin.
Okay.
So
very interesting.
Yeah. So when you talk about Bitcoin, so we went into algorithmic, and it's a token. There isn't, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but there isn't anything that ascribes value to Bitcoin other than human nature.
Right. But you could say the same thing about money.
Yeah. That's
the dollar bill.
That's the reason why we'll bring this around into why is it valuable. But, you know, by and large, from the Bitcoin standpoint, it's just a token called Bitcoin.
Okay.
And then various other people have taken that code or that software and set up their own. Ethereum is based on Bitcoin. They started with the Bitcoin code and added all sorts of other cool features into it. But there's thousands of other derivations of cryptocurrency that are based on the Bitcoin model.
And so then when you see the upgrades, I'm not going to get the terms right, but so with Ethereum, they do definitely these upgrades, or you see Ethereum 2.0 or things like that. That's just them updating the software or adding more to the algorithm.
Right.
Okay.
And without going down that rabbit hole, there's been very little in the way of updates to Bitcoin in a long time.
Right.
It's considered stable and just out there. They don't have any sort of organization around them like Ethereum does. And they do these, what are called EIPs, I'm not good with algorithms, but I believe it's in Ethereum improvement proposals, but where people can propose things and then vote on it. And if it actually, the vote is accepted, then they can go ahead and implement these things. So that's a big difference between
Bitcoin and Ethereum.
But some would say there's risk in it, that Bitcoin or Ethereum,
because they're doing those updates.
Right.
Yeah.
There have been some controversial updates done to Ethereum that some people haven't liked, but the majority have actually carried it and it's moved forward. So, you got to look at, under the hood as far as what is the overall philosophy on
well, and this is, it sounds like, because this is one of the reasons that I'm kind of taking a right turn here, but it's one of the reasons I like cryptocurrencies, because it kind of evens the playing field, and it sounds like it's that way with the creation of it, with the distribution of it, all of that. It's really universal.
Yeah. If somebody comes up with a better mousetrap, there is the potential for people to take it up.
Right.
So who's to say that the crypto today is going to be the crypto of tomorrow?
Right.
But right now, again, it's $1 trillion market, and Bitcoin's been around for more than 14 years.
Yeah,
and it's withstood a lot of political development, hacking.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is that a lot of when you think about getting my licenses, we had to learn a lot about all the laws that were enacted in the 1930s for the stock market, and when because Bitcoin was or I should just say crypto was all the rage a couple years ago, right? And then it tanked. But everyone came to me and, you think it's just over? And I was just thinking, no, I mean, if you think about the history of the stock market, I mean, my goodness, up and down. And it took years to get it right, to get all the safeguards in place so that we didn't have those, another 1929 stock market crash. And so do you think it's kind of the same thing? I mean, don't you think it's, you're vetting anything out? I just think of it like any technology, like solar panels. It takes years to figure out how to make it viable and safe and, It
really is the history of bubbles, whether you talk about crypto or the stock market or Beanie Babies collecting Nike sneakers or whatever.
Babies, yeah.
Or a lot of people
Cabbage Patch Kids.
A lot of people liken it to the tulip bulb craze in the Netherlands and things like that, and they use those analogies when they actually say, it's over and things like that. Well, you don't necessarily know. You got to actually watch the track record. And, one of the things that in my definition is that it's crypto has a defined constraint. And, in Bitcoin, for example, they call it the halving. So originally when Bitcoin started, for every block, which is a series of transactions, which is released every 10 seconds on Bitcoin, they would give a reward. So 50 new Bitcoins would be minted. And that's how it was for the first 4 years.
Okay.
Well, that number halves every year every 4 years, to the point that right now it's a little over 6. It's 6.25.
Okay.
And in 2025, it's going to halve again down to 3 1/8.
Okay.
So if you look at the actual cycles, again, we don't have a lot of track record on this, but if you look at the boom and bust cycles on crypto, right now they align with the boom or the halving on Bitcoin. So there's a lot of speculation that, the next upswing will be, in 2025 when Bitcoin halves again. So what that does is it builds in a deflationary pressures, or reduces the amount of inflation because it's known from the start. It's actually written into the code what this thing does. So you know what it's going to do. Can you actually say that about anything else that we ascribe value to?
Right.
You know, if like, you know, suddenly, you know, again, sneakers, you know, one of them take off, who's to say that the manufacturer just can't bust out, you know, millions of them and things like that. It's the same thing with the US dollar, you know, it's like,
they just print
sorts of mechanisms in place that we have no control over.
Well, and it's like Ethereum. When you trade, it burns it up, or I'm doing terrible on that, but it does, right? So it keeps the inflation of it because you're creating Ethereum, right? But then as you're spending it and exchanging it, that fee is then burned up, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's EIP 1559. And it was really a controversial implementation a couple of years ago.
I think it's so smart.
A lot of people didn't want it.
Yeah.
And it's to the point that if the network gets really busy, if the Ethereum network gets really busy, it burns more Ethereum than it actually creates.
Oh, wow.
So right now it's, you know, because the market for crypto is soft, it still is a net positive in the amount of new Ethereum that it's minting, but it can go the other way pretty quickly. But it, you know, getting back to the original point, that hasn't changed in Bitcoin. In Ethereum, they voted and changed it a couple of years ago. Who's to say they won't vote to undo that change or something like that in the future? You know, it's
and it's kind of, my belief is kind of like Bitcoin is the, you know, the original Model T of Ford Model T, and then there's going to be all these cryptos that are like the upgrades.
Yeah. So
I mean, do you kind of view it that way?
Absolutely. Remember in 2007 when everybody had a BlackBerry and everything like that, and everybody's like, cell phones are done. This little keyboard thing is great. And everything like that. And then Apple jumped, you know, there were hundreds of millions of cell phones out there, and then Apple comes up with and
then everybody, now BlackBerry's not even around really.
And it completely changed a market that everybody had assumed was done for. They disrupted that market. So it's hard to say that there isn't going to be another cryptocurrency that comes out of this. I think Ethereum started, I want to say in 2012 or 2013. So it was really early.
Yeah, it is early. Well, and you said something too about on the Ethereum network. And so I think this is what's confusing to people too. It's on a series of computers, correct?
Yeah. And there isn't any restriction in the amount of it, computers that can actually be participating in this.
And so I could have a computer at my house that would have the Ethereum network on my computer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so it's just code.
Yeah.
Okay.
And right now, you know, again, avoiding getting too technical, but Ethereum a couple of years ago moved to what's called proof of stake, where you have to actually hold Ethereum to mint new Ethereum. So to work the algorithmic proofs in order to get some Ethereum as a reward. Well, to run a validator now, you know, you could run it on a computer that's about the size of a deck of cards.
Wow.
And cost you less than $100 in order to actually.
And so what do you think about this whole energy thing that has been in the news about how it uses too much energy? And
well, that was the reason why Ethereum went to proof of stake was, you know, I do believe that the Ethereum network, the people behind Ethereum are fighting the good fight. And, you know.
Yeah, but do you really believe in that? I mean, just your opinion about I feel like it was just kind of a smear campaign.
I don't think so. It was
really?
More than 10% of global electric production went to cryptocurrency mining.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know
it was
that
significant.
High.
It was more, you know, it was using more power than most of South America combined.
Oh my God. Okay.
So it was significant.
Yeah.
And a lot of that went to Ethereum, and that's why their objective was to actually switch to a different model. But, you know, when you talk about, you know, proof of, you know, it's like you can just use airline miles as an example. You get miles as proof of flying, you know, and things like that. So you can actually extrapolate it out to a few different things. So that's the reason why we don't necessarily need to go down into
right.
how do you actually get these things. So
when I'm staking it, because I own some Ethereum and I have staked it, or I guess I've let them stake it where I have it. They are then mining. So they're basically paying me interest so that they can mine.
Yeah, so
I'm loaning them my Ethereum.
They'll then take your Ethereum and combine it with other people's Ethereum to come up with 32 is the requirement in order to have a validator. So there's a lot of, like Coinbase or Lido that aggregate other people's crypto and give you another token in return that you can then redeem in order to get your Ethereum back. But you get a VIG or a certain percentage of additional Ethereum by contributing that to the pool. And
so do you think, because you're talking all of these things, so you have to have 32 and, so you understand all of this, but for the person on the street, we're never going to understand all of these little, you have to have all this. And I think that's what scares people, right?
It's a challenge.
They feel like they could be taken advantage of. And I would say in my industry, it's kind of like an annuity. There's a million different bells and whistles and you can get taken advantage of. And that's why people are scared of it, right? And so what's kind of your opinion on that?
I think they're absolutely right. But this goes back historically. There are always going to be hacks and things like that. One of the main things is, again, hearkening back to the early days of the internet when we saw a lot of this cryptography being used for that. There were a lot of hacks and end runs around that. And it was one of those things that those of us working on that type of development at the time, one of the terms we use is ubiquity. It needs to be one of these things that it's as ubiquitous as the toaster. You don't really think about your toaster. It makes toast. You don't really think about...
You don't think you can get swindled by your toaster. Yeah.
You don't think about your email being encrypted or, encryption on the websites. Remember the little lock and everything like that. Nobody even thinks about it. It's just
Plaid now, I don't think about it. I go, okay, I know Plaid is... Yeah, and before...
That's how you verify your account.
Yeah, right. So 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, I don't know, what is this Plaid thing? Or even PayPal, things like that. So you think it's just more about us getting used to it?
Getting used to it, but also technology catching up a bit to make it more ubiquitous. It's certainly a lot easier than it was. There are big organizations now that handle the purchase of crypto in various currencies. They're pretty much available around the world, and the ability to exchange it and convert it to something else, where those things didn't exist up until a few years ago. So the early days of crypto, I remember when I first picked up Bitcoin, it was one of those things. It was the Wild West. You had to get on, you could buy it on Craigslist.
Oh, wow.
Things like that. It was just one of those things. And because it was worth pennies or
nobody cared.
Pennies, it was just one of those things that it was just something that if you're intrigued in it,
So when you first heard about it, were you automatically very interested?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this could be something.
Yeah, because for me as a developer and engineer and stuff, the first thing, any technology, I peek under the hood. So since I could actually download the source code and play around with it, I was like, this is really cool.
Really?
But did I think that it was going to be valuable? I think from the time I truly was introduced to it till the time that I was like, I actually need to get into this, it had just been circulating around and coming in and out of my consciousness because I didn't really think it was going to be valuable.
But just cool.
Yeah, it was just a neat little thing that you could mess around with and set up yourself and everything like that. The early days of the World Wide Web,
my gosh, right?
Was the exact same way. It's oh, look, I have my own little web page up and everything like that. And it looked like a ransom
Type this in exactly like this without one letter. Being missing. Yeah.
Now, exactly. Now we have all of these interfaces like search engines and things like that, to the point that you don't actually probably even know what the domain name is to get to your bank.
And then with AI, I mean, who knows where all of that is even going to go.
It became ubiquitous at that point. But
so, okay. So, do you, now that you've seen some traction with, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the big guys, Let's go into how you think that it's going to be applicable in the future, or, how we can be using crypto and how you see some things coming.
Well, that's,
I should just say, how can crypto, because we think of it more as just cash, right? Or trading like on a stock market, like a stock.
I think a better way to look at it is a store of value.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily a currency. You can trade a store of value like gold, precious metals, things along those lines. For as long as there's been civilization, we've come up with things to trade. I volunteer in the Navajo reservation every year, and they, going back 2,000 years in Arizona, they used to trade these little tiny beads, and they've found like caches and strings of these little tiny beads, and that was their commerce. And if you look at tribes in Africa, for example, like their show of wealth is how many cows they have, things like that. So it's just another thing to trade. The hard part to get your head around is that it's digital. It's not one of those things that you can point to it sitting in a room or anything like that. But that's also one of the things that gives it some of its advantages.
Right.
And that, like right now, I advise on a number of different projects in crypto, and I have one project where there's developers in Lebanon and Turkey and Ukraine. That, if you look at their economies, the inflation rates are insane. These are fundamentally broken areas where people are establishing barter systems and things like that. And they have to spend a lot of their time getting fuel for their generators and food and things like that. It's just a terrible way to live that we don't think about.
Right.
But these are people that are otherwise functional, really good programmers and things like that. But they're dealing with economic systems that are broken. But they want to participate in the global labor pool and provide value. And the only way to actually compensate them is with crypto.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. It evens the playing field.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
And like our systems in the United States are, like you mentioned, Plaid, which is built on top of the ACH system, where ACH has been around for more than 60 years. I dealt with that, in the early days of dedicated lines and magnetic tape, and it goes back to punch cards and things like that. And the overall structure is the same. But there are a lot of economies like China and Africa and things like that are able to leapfrog us. So if you look at Africa, for example, they're very used to mobile payments. They can actually just go into a store or something like that, and everybody's got the same app and everything like that, and they can just transfer tokens to each other, and those tokens are related to a particular currency and stuff like that. So a lot of the world's actually used to this.
Right. Well, because they don't have the dollar. Right. We have the dollar. And so they haven't had a good economy. So they haven't had anything that they can rely on. And so this has become something that they can rely on.
For sure.
Yeah.
But we carry cards in our wallet that, that somehow adjust our balance and everything like that. Well, that's just a number represented in the credit card company system up until the point they're like settle this in dollars. But, those major credit card networks can settle in any currency, and they do for merchants around the world. So it's just ascribing a value to something digitally that's going on. So we're used to it. It's just a matter of, getting past all of the, understandings that we have to come up and truly ascribe value to this nebulous concept of crypto. But, when you fly over the country, when you go from California to Arizona or something, you're not seeing lines drawn on the ground that say that's Arizona. Arizona, more than anything, is a concept. It's something that we all agree upon. It's borders, it's here, it's government and everything like that. It's the same thing with crypto. It's just an agreement that it's valuable and this is how it works. Things can reinforce or erode agreements over time. And that's probably going to happen with crypto.
Oh my gosh, that is such a good analogy. I love that so much. That's the state one is really a great analogy. And so do you think that, so let's go back. So how are, companies going to use crypto, or because that's what I find interesting is that there's certain cryptos that are for certain industries.
Yeah. I mean, there's one called Ripple or XRP that is used a lot on the banking side of it. It's not really, individuals don't necessarily trade it. You can buy it on exchanges and stuff like that, but it's more for, interbank communication and things like that. It's how it's set up, but it's also what's called a closed loop. There isn't really any say, it's that foundation that is actually responsible for the minting of it and things like that. And those rules are a little bit nebulous, but then there's other ones that crop up for specialized industries, such as, paying for video production or inventory control and things like that. So, it's possible to set up industry-based tokens, and they exist. Airline miles are a great example,
right,
of something that could be put onto a crypto really easily.
Well, and I think about my kids playing Roblox, they're Robux in there. They're going to be so used to this that because a lot of the crypto is like Uniswap and, some of these things are just particularly used for certain websites to either play games or trade things and all of that. And it's no different than going on to Roblox and getting Robux. But people will argue you have to have the dollar in order to do that. So we spend our dollars and then we're, converting them into Robux.
Yeah. And
but then I could see how then people start to just trade the Robux.
But you can make it in the game, I'm sure I don't know that.
Yeah. You don't play Roblox. Yeah.
But I can see, because I've seen tokenomics in other games where, you can buy your way in. You can go ahead and spend money in order to kind of accelerate your advancement in the game, or you can just grind it out and earn the tokens or the currency over time. It's proof of play.
Right. Okay. Proof of play, proof of stake.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. So, I didn't even think about that.
So there's different ways to just take these mechanisms in order to familiarize yourself with what's going on. So it's not one of those things that Bitcoin's an outlier. It's just playing on all of these things, concepts that we're already used to. Like humans want to collect things and ascribe value to things and enter in these various agreements and things like that. It's no different.
Right. And so I can definitely see what you were saying about the future. Cause I mean, my kids are so used to playing these games and then exchanging into some sort of token. What's going to be, the difference for them. It'll
be ubiquitous.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think what immediately comes up for me when I think about that kind of stuff is that I don't know about computers. I'm a talker. I am not a computer person. And so we don't know that, there's these, when I have, read these blogs and looked at these videos of these people in charge of crypto, I mean, they're geniuses, this is, big brain people. And so how do we know that they're not going to, we guess we just don't know if they're going to like hack the system or whatever. But now that I say that to you, there's no difference between us just getting used to, I could have said the same thing about PayPal. Yeah. Right. And doing electronic payments that way. I didn't know if somebody could just log into my account and take, what I had in there.
But because of the open nature of cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin and Ethereum, where virtually everything that they do is published and accessible, everything from their decision-making processes to the code itself, because it's out there, it's straightforward for those big brains to go in and analyze it. And they do, and tear it apart and everything like that and raise warnings. There have been some big crypto failures in the past.
But that's if they're on the right side. So if there's someone that is...
But that's the nature of these things.
Yeah, it's the same thing with anything that we've invented.
Yeah, the same thing happened in the early days of the internet. There were vulnerabilities in the web browsers that what are called white hat hackers would actually expose those vulnerabilities. And rather than publicizing them, they would take them to Microsoft or Chrome or what have you and alert them to that, to the point that they could do a quick release and things like that in order to improve it. This is no different.
Right. So basically it's just going to take time for us to get used to this.
Yeah. It's still the Wild West. There's still a long way to go. This is really equivalent to what the internet was like in 1995. You know, I think the early days of the internet had a lot more protections, you know, with cryptocurrency. You know, there's a lot of news about potential regulation. Is it a token that needs to be regulated by the SEC and things like that? Where in the early days of the internet, the United States did something really smart, and Congress passed a law, I forgot the name of it, but that restricted the introduction of taxes and levies against the internet for a period of time. And that allowed it to grow, for the internet to explode without reining it in and everybody playing whack-a-mole trying to get their own piece of the pie on it.
Yeah. Do you remember buying stuff on there and there was no tax on anything that you bought on the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was crazy. I mean, now that I think about it, I'm like, that's crazy.
But you know, there were things that protected, you know, the on-ramps and things like that, as far as, you know, being able to incentivize people to actually get on the internet.
Well, I like though that, I mean, because, you know, I'm talking about all the vulnerabilities, but I love that when you have a current or a cryptocurrency, or let's just say Bitcoin, you know, it's on everybody's computer and it is just, you know, code that is running, correct?
Yeah.
So it's not like somebody can, like, you know, and a 10-year-old kid that's messing around can get in there and mess it up because it's on millions of different people's computers.
Right. You know, it is becoming as ubiquitous as the web browser. It'll eventually get there. Pretty soon, every web browser will have a crypto wallet built into it. Brave is an example of a web browser that's derived from Google Chrome, where they have built-in crypto.
Is that what you use?
I use it for some stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a robust tool, and the people behind it are behind a lot of the early days of the internet, so they can trace their genesis back to, you know, as the internet started. So
wow. And so, do you like to pay with crypto still?
No, it's a difficult thing to do, because for everybody to payer, there needs to be somebody that actually receives it. And then the other thing is it's not always practical for small transactions, because sometimes the transaction fees, depending on the activity, because again, it's market driven. There's no fixed fee or anything like that. So sometimes, you know, if it's really busy, to do a $30 transaction, it could be, you know, $5 in fees. Well, it's like, I'll just use PayPal.
And so do you think that if it's really busy, that sort of thing will go away in the future, I guess? Because what will happen? How would it become less busy? Is it just because it would be on more computers?
Well, I think that part of what will happen is the advent of more transaction-based systems that are built around, like the credit card networks are transaction-based systems that are built around global currencies. They actually move money around, or numbers around, on a rapid basis, like 1,500 transactions a second. And then at a certain time, every day or whatever it may be, they then settle up all of those transactions into a particular dollar amount.
Okay.
So the same thing can occur on crypto in what right now is called a side chain. You know, for Ethereum, for example, there's side chains of Polygon and Arbitrum that allow you to transact at much lower fees. And then when you choose to do so, you can actually take that Ethereum back out.
Okay. So there's technology out there that they're trying to work on so that it's not busy, so that you're not paying high transaction fees.
Yeah.
Because it's going to have to get to that point if the lovers of, you know, of crypto want it to be as adopted as,
and it needs to somewhat blend with traditional finance or centralized finance. So you've got PayPal and Block or Square, for example, allow you in their various applications. If you choose to do so, you can actually settle your balance in one of the named cryptos, like Bitcoin or Ethereum. You can actually do that and then buy those cryptos and hold them in those particular systems. So as it starts blending together, that it's another option, because going back to ACH, which is all based on checks and everything like that. I mean, that used to be a mess in order to like tie your bank to another bank. And then a technology like Plaid comes along and wraps around that. And now you don't even think about it. When you go to, it's like when you go to link your bank account, it's just like, all right, where's your other bank? And you just put in the info and it's like, I got you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So do you think in the future, everyone's just going to be mining different coins? Like have their computers and be mining different coins? Yeah,
I think using the generic term mine, it'll be proof of whatever.
Right.
Know? So, like there's talk about government stable coins, or like and eventually governments will get into this currency.
Yeah, I don't see how they wouldn't.
Like referring to the ACH system, that transacts $33 trillion a year in transactions. It's absolutely massive system, but this technology can be applied to anything that's moving around that volume.
Right. Because really all that we're looking for is just something to barter with. I mean, it goes back to, because I think that's easy for people to extrapolate to. We did barter things and now we have cash, and then maybe this is going to be something where we are all doing just coins and things like that. Yeah.
So you got to ask yourself, whatever these systems that I'm using, whether it's crypto or a currency, or, if some people stack silver or something like that, it's like, what are the vulnerabilities, in order to keep that? I'm a big believer in metals. I always have been, because they have a utility. I'm not necessarily a fan of gold just because it's, good for jewelry and it looks good and stuff like that. But silver, 40% of it's destroyed every year. So there's an inherent mining, if you will, and that's where the term comes from, that limits the actual inflation of that asset, the ability to create more of it.
I didn't know that. And did they take a lot of these terms from like mining and all that? They just took a lot of terms so that it would correlate with the real world kind of thing.
It's part of an analogy, so it allows you to go, well, it's just like mining, rather than having a shovel digging stuff out of the ground. You have a computer that's actually doing the work of foraging around for these proofs or what have you, in order to show that you're the winner of that amount of crypto.
Right.
It's the exact same thing as the analogy is like the gold rush and things like that.
Yeah. I just didn't know if, my kids are going to be growing up and being like, I got this computer room and I'm mining, whatever back here. And that's just going to be the norm.
Yeah.
And that's just what everybody's going to be doing.
It's something they'll be a lot more used to. So because an entire generation and beyond is going to be used to that, then people that are developing these technologies or whatever it may be in the future will be able to align with that. So their paradigm will follow it. Part of it's just gamification. It's like I use the Apple Watch and it gives me points, if you will, for exercising every day and stuff like that. And
I hate that I get racked in it. I'm always like, I got to go close this ring. I need to get this. I want to get this one thing for June. Yeah. I hate that. I was like, I didn't think I'd get like that, but you do.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you could actually trade those, it's like, hey, I got all this exercise today. Want some exercise?
Right. AARP does do that, though. They give you money and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like you hook your watch up and then they'll give you
and that
so
right
much
there
money.
is just proof of exercise.
Yeah. So. Proof of exercise. Oh, I like this. I'm going to adopt this. I'll be like, I'm proof of sitting.
For your kids, it could be proof of room cleaning.
Yeah, different things like that. And that because you're just changing the analogy, really. Like if you want your allowance, you need to have proof of room cleaning. Yeah. And then I'll give you this.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's just gamification and getting into that human nature to want to collect things and go, ooh, how can I get more of those? And then, and then later on you just go, do I really actually need that?
Yeah.
One concept that I use though is when, it's like people always ask me, well, how much crypto should I buy?
Yeah.
Or, it can apply to anything, whether it's precious metals or canned goods or something like that. It's, the thing I always come back with is what percentage of likelihood do you think that the thesis is going to bear out?
And what does that mean?
So,
I don't know what that means.
So whatever is circulating around cryptocurrency, it's going to be worth $100,000 in 10 years, or it's going to go to zero or something like that. Whatever you actually are speculating on.
Okay.
It's the same thing with gold.
Yeah.
You don't actually hold on to it. It's going to be worthless someday.
Right. Right. But that's exactly why I have the show, is picking and choosing what you want and what you believe in,
right, and
what you're excited about.
Right.
And if you're super excited about it, then, and a couple years ago, I was super excited about crypto. And now I look at it and I'm like, I'm going to wait a little bit. You know, you can just kind of check in with yourself.
It comes and it goes. You know, the same thing with metals or any one of a number of other things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you just got to actually do your research. But then it's also position allocation, which is something that you talk about, you know, when it comes to buying anything. You know, we're not all Wall Street bets where we just go all in on one particular stock because that's what they do. You know, where some people could say, you know, I think gold is the future, so I'm going to put 100%. And it's like, you do you.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you think that, you know, precious metals are an inflation hedge that you want to put 3% in. It's just position allocation.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with crypto. You know, how likely do you think that it's going to play out, that it's going to have long-term value?
Yeah.
3%, 5%. So then I just position allocate based upon what I think the likelihood of the thesis bearing out is. And that's
kind of what I do. I spread it out a little bit. So I do have gold and silver, and then I have some crypto because, you know, it's like, I'm going to give it a try and see. But then I read about new cryptos and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll try, you know, Cardano, and I'll try Mana, and, you know, all these different ones. So,
but, you know, some of those haven't played out know, for the successful ones, but it's just, it's economics. It's a long tail, you know, it's just,
but this is no different than stock market or something. I mean, you know, I've lost my shirt on the stock market and on some stocks, and some have been home runs, and it's kind of the same thing.
Or the currency of Zaire, or anything like that. Yeah. You know, it's like, you know,
there's a million different things you can get in. You get in derivatives and futures and the currencies, and I mean, it's just no different.
Another one. And that's the reason why I think, you know, circling back around on this whole thing, I think it's just a misunderstanding that people are kind of lumping crypto into an outlier. The only thing that's really an outlier of it that's different is the virtual nature of it. But other than that, it aligns with so many other concepts that we're used to. Yeah.
And I don't think that we realize that we're already using those concepts.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
We use them in our everyday life.
Right. And most of us don't even carry cash anymore.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I hardly ever have cash. And the only reason I have to have cash is because of my kids and paying them allowance.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's crazy.
But, you know, even cash itself, you know, prior to the 70s, we were on the gold standard, and then Nixon's like, we won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, but we still, but I'm sure in a back room, they were all sitting there going, they're still going to believe it's valuable.
Right.
And it is. We believe in this agreement around a piece of paper, and it's perfectly fine. It allows us to transact and be the largest economy in the world, but not everybody in the world has that luxury.
Right.
You know, so like an example that I use a lot on this is in, 2016, you know, as you know, I do a lot of business in India, a lot of development offshoring and things like that. In 2016, India called and replaced their currency. So they overnight pulled 86% of their currency out of the market.
Wow.
And that left everybody scrambling because they had such an undercurrent of people just transacting off the books, if you will, just in cash, you know, just pay me cash and I'll give you a discount and everything like that. Well, they overnight, in order to squash that, made everybody turn in their money, and they could only turn in a limited amount of it. And then it just made the rest of it worthless.
Wow.
They pulled 86% out overnight. And I remember employees, like, it just screwed up the productivity because employees had to spend a couple hours a day going to an ATM just to get cash. And we had to, as a business, sort out how we were going to pay these people. And it was a scramble for a good month or so.
Well, and don't you think that's an argument for cryptocurrency? Because that's a government just deciding to do something.
Right. But it's an example of something, how many people in the United States even knew that was going on. And this is something that affected over 1 billion people.
Right. Yeah. I had no idea. Yeah, that's crazy.
Right.
Okay.
So, for me anyway, when you talk about the value of cryptocurrency, from my experiences over the last couple of years, it really aligns with what's going on globally, not necessarily in the United States. So when people are looking to I do think there needs to be a little bit more regulation, particularly around exchanges or these on-ramps to avoid some of the things like FTX and Celsius and the issues around those. But those occur on the stock market as well.
Right.
There's, even runs on banks and things like that. It still occurs in any system that people.
Right. We're never going to shore up every single bad thing that can happen.
Right.
Right. It's like we can never have enough laws on the books, even, just for driving and things like that. Yeah. So we can just do the best that we can.
But I do think that a little bit more regulation will help in the adoption of it.
Okay. All right, cool. And so usually I ask people, is there any piece of financial advice that you'd like to give, or that you like to give? And it can be related to crypto or anything like that, but that's usually what I ask my guests at the end of it.
Yeah, I think, it kind of ties back into something I said a few minutes ago, which is, really can be boiled down to allocate responsibly, so don't put money into crypto at this particular point that you can't afford to lose.
Right. Exactly.
But
I think it's the same as the stock market.
Yeah.
So when I was doing it, I would just take $500, $1,000, whenever if we got tax money back, I would just, I'm just throwing money in there as I was just feeling it, reading about different cryptos, stuff like that. And it ended up doing really well. And so I think that's what people need to realize. It's not that you need to take $5,000. Just if they want to start, you could start with literally $25 or $50.
Yeah. And get in it. Just allocate small and just add
until you get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then also just figure out what it's for, so many people this is all over in the stock market. They, they'll buy a stock like Snowflake or something like that. And I'm like, do you even know what they do? It's like, no, I heard on somebody on some Discord server said, hey, you got to buy this.
This is exactly why I started this podcast. Just stuff like that. So you don't have to do that. Yeah.
Right. So, but it is one of those things that if you want to go on a hunch or something along those lines, just don't go all in. Just allocate a tiny bit or what. And I'll tell you, because I trade derivatives, options and things like that. And a lot of it's just a position allocation because I've been burned by it in the past. It's like, oh, I allocated too much of that and it went against me and stuff. So I'm always looking at it. It's like, what's the risk reward and things like that. And you just got to, with some of these cryptos.
But it's like any other investment. If you're going to buy a house, if you're going to buy a business, anything like that, I would never recommend that people drain their savings account, if they have like an emergency savings or something. You just always need to have some cash on hand. But if you're going to invest, crypto might be one of the investments that you want to do instead of a stock that you might have purchased before.
Right.
Okay.
And again, it's just, I look at it as a hedge.
Yeah.
It's just,
I do too.
It's a hedge. It's like, how likely is it that the thesis is going to be right?
Yeah. Well, and I do that with everything. I just like to spread it out a little bit because they're not all going to hit at once either.
Yeah.
And you don't know, not all investments. And I just know this from working with people too. It's like not all investments are home runs. Some are just okay. Some you do lose, and it's like a fund that has multiple apartments and commercial buildings. Usually 95% of them are good. 5%, are might not make any money on.
Yeah.
So it's just
hope for an overall upward trajectory.
Right. And I don't think people understand that about investing, is that just not everything is going to hit. It's more about just doing it consistently, and trying things. And then some of it hits and some of it doesn't. And you just need to be, you can't be holding on to an investment hoping that it's going to, it's going to hit.
Like, it's kind of like, using a baseball analogy, it's like you can't hit everything you swing at.
No, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, this has been fun. I hope we can come up with other topics.
Oh my gosh, I know. I just is so excited to have you on. So thank you so much. And let us know your thoughts in the comments, guys. And please subscribe to the show and let me know if you have any questions, and I will be sure to answer them. So thank you again, Andy, for being on.
Wonderful. Always a pleasure.